Hello friends, in this video we discuss about what is obversion and rule of obversion. What is obversion? The first पढ़िया में what is obversion. Obversion is kind of immediate deductive inference in which the subject of the premise become the same subject of the conclusion and the predicate of the premise become the contradictory predicate of the conclusion where the meaning is same. Fact, obversion is kind of immediate deductive inference in which the subject of the premise become the same subject of the conclusion and predicate of the premise become contradictory predicate of the conclusion where the meaning is same. First जिनस ये कि obversion तार subject टा obversion होची एक immediate deductive inference रा पकड़े होतो. obversion होची एक immediate deductive inference रा पकड़े होतो. immediate deductive inference रा पकड़े होतो जेउंटी की subject of the premise गोटे premise रा subject टा से conclusion नो same subject हबो conclusion नो premise रा subject टा conclusion नो same subject हबो एवं the predicate of the premise become the contradictory predicate of the conclusion. Contradictory predicate of the conclusion. Contradictory predicate of the conclusion. First जिनस obversion is a kind of immediate deductive inference in which the subject of the premise become the same subject of the conclusion and the predicate of the premise become the contradictory predicate of the conclusion where the meaning is same. Subject is same subject habo, predicate is contradictory hei jibo. Then rule of obversion. There are four rules of obversion. Obversion charity नियम अच्छी. The first rule is said that in obversion the subject of the premise become the same subject of the conclusion and the predicate of the premise become contradictory predicate of the conclusion. The first rule said that in obversion the subject of the premise become the same subject of the conclusion and the predicate of the premise become the contradictory predicate of the conclusion. Second, the quality of the obversion is changed. That means if the premise is affirmative, the conclusion must be negative, and the premise is negative, the conclusion must be affirmative. Second rule. The third rule said that the quantity is same. That means if the premise is universal, the conclusion must be universal. If the premise is particular, the conclusion must be particular. Fourth rule. No term distribute the conclusion can distribute the premise. The first rule said that in the obversion, the subject of the premise become the same subject of the conclusion and the predicate of the premise become the contradictory predicate of the conclusion. ताले subject टा conclusion नो same subject हबो और obversion नो premise रो subject टा conclusion नो same subject हबो और predicate हबो contradictory predicate हे जो contradictory predicate means ता opposite हे जो और not dash लगले सुदे चलिबो ताले subject टा से subject रो predicate टा contradictory predicate हे जिवो. The second rule said that quality of the obversion is changed. The quality of obversion is changed. That means the premise is affirmative, the conclusion must be negative, and the premise is affirmative, negative, the conclusion must be affirmative. तारे quality change है जो quality अनुसार proportion दिवारे होता है जी. Quality अनुसार proportion को दिवारे होता है जी. और हला affirmative proportion, और हला negative proportion. Affirmative proportion, negative proportion. Affirmative proportion हला A I और negative proportion हला E O. The premise quality change है जो quality दिवारे होता है जी. और हला affirmative proportion और हला negative proportion. यदि affirmative होची A I और negative हला E O. यदि quality टा कौन है जो conclusion premise टा affirmative है तो conclusion negative जो premise टा negative तो conclusion टा affirmative है जीपो. Therefore, there is change in the quality in the obversion. That means if the premise is affirmative, the conclusion must be negative, and the premise is negative, conclusion must be affirmative. And the third rule says that the quantity of obversion is same. The quantity of obversion is same. ताले obversion क्वांटिटी सेम हम ओवर्सन क्वांटिटी अनुसार प्रोपोर्शन को दिया होता है क्वांटिटी अनुसार प्रोपोर्शन को दिया होता है गोटे यूनिवर्सल प्रोपोर्शन आउला पर्टिकुलर प्रोपोर्शन यूनिवर्सल प्रोपोर्शन आउला पर्टिकुलर प्रोपोर्शन ता क्वांटिटी अनुसार दिया होता है प्रोपोर्शन को गोटे यूनिवर्सल प्रोपोर्शन आउला पर्टिकुलर प्रोपोर्शन यूनिवर्सल प्रोपोर्शन है के ए ई है यूनिवर्सल प्रोपोर्शन पर्टिकुलर प्रोपोर्शन है आई ओ पर्टिकुलर प्रोपोर्शन है आई ओ ता क्वांटिटी हम सेम हम क्वांटिटी सेम हम ओवर्सन क्वांटिटी सेम हम ता क्वांटिटी से दिया होता है गोटे यूनिवर्सल प्रोपोर्शन और है पर्टिकुलर प्रोपोर्शन ता यूनिवर्सल प्रोपोर्शन लेके ए ई पर्टिकुलर प्रोपोर्शन है आई ओ ताले जब प्रेमिसटा यूनिवर्सल है ता कंक्लूजन से यूनिवर्सल हम और पर्टिकुलर यदि कंक्लूजन रे प्रेमिस से पर्टिकुलर है कंक्लूजन भी पर्टिकुलर हम ताले इन ओवर्सन द क्वांटिटी इज same that means if the premise is universal the conclusion must be universal if the premise is particular the conclusion must be particular ताले universal थिले conclusion universal हबो premise टा particular थिले conclusion टा particular हबो the four rules said that the no term distribute the conclusion can distribute the premise जो term टा conclusion distribute हेने माने ता premise distribute हे परिबो नहीं तेनु करी कि हमर देयर आर फोर रूल ऑफ ओवर्सन फर्स्ट रूल देयर in the overson the subject of the premise become the same subject of the conclusion and the predicate of the premise become contradictory predicate of the conclusion. The second rule said that the quality is changed that means if the premise is affirmative the conclusion must be affirmative the premise is the second rule said that change in the quality of the proposition in overson the quality of the proposition is changed that means the premise is affirmative the conclusion must be negative the premise is negative the conclusion must be affirmative the third rule said that the quantity of overson is same that means the premise is universal the conclusion must be universal premise is particular the conclusion must be particular the fourth rule said that no term distribute the conclusion cannot reproduce the premise.